The P-40 Warhawk is usually pushed out from the limelight by the more powerful and more well-known fighters like the P-51, P-47 or Spitfire. Though it couldn't compete in the high-altitude dogfights over Western Europe, it was a very rugged, agile and well-designed fighter, and it was actually the third most produced US fighter plane in World War II. It showed its strength in North Africa, over the Mediterranean, on the South Pacific and on the Far East as well. The story of the P-40 actually starts in 1934, with its predecessor, the Curtiss P-36 Hawk. The Hawk was a very agile, well-turning and easy-to-fly aircraft, but it was underpowered and was lacking in top speed and acceleration. Well before World War II, the Army Air Corps realized that P-36 cannot keep up with the more modern European fighter planes, and a project was started to modify it to use the more powerful Ellison V1710 engines instead of the Pratt & Whitney air-cooled ones. Using the already established P-36 as a base, the P-40's development was relatively short and allowed them to enter production relatively quickly. The XP-37 was fitted with a turbo-supercharged V1710-11 engine. To make room for the supercharger, the nose was lengthened and the cockpit moved back towards the tail. Though the performance increased with the new engine, the prototype had visibility and stability problems. 13 more prototypes were ordered for further evaluation under the name YP-37, but in the end this project was cancelled. In parallel, a more simple modification was tried, which equipped the P-36 with an Ellison engine using only a single-stage supercharger and no turbocharger. The smaller engine allowed the cockpit to remain in the original place. The new plane, the XP-40 prototype, made its first flight in October 1938, and at first the improvements were below expectations. Eventually the new engine gave the new XP-40 prototype a 50 mph speed advantage over the P-36, but only after some modifications and weeks spent in the wind tunnel. Initially the radiator was placed in an underbelly position, much like on the P-51. After the wind tunnel testing, the radiators were moved under the chin, and some other minor modifications were made, resulting in a 366 mph top speed. Though the new engine gave the XP-40 a speed advantage over its predecessor, the lack of two-stage supercharger compromised its high-altitude performance. The later production versions of the plane tried to fix this problem by using more powerful engines. The production P-40 was very similar to the XP-40 prototype, and already in 1939 orders for the new plane started to come in from France and Britain. But more on this when we get to the combat history of the plane. Let's see the technical specifications quickly, looking at the most popular P-40E version. The P-40's armament consisted of 6 50 caliber machine guns in the wings and up to 2,000 pounds of bomb load. The plane used the Ellison V1710 liquid-cooled engine, producing 1,240 horsepower. The maximum speed was 334 mph at 15,000 feet. The cruise speed was 308 mph with a range of 716 miles. The plane's service ceiling was 29,100 feet. First, let's quickly mention that the Warhawk name was officially only applied from the P-40F and later models. The P-40, P-40B and P-40C variants were known as Tomahawks, while the P-40D and later models were called Kittyhawks, at least until the Air Corps adopted the Warhawk name for all models in June 1941. So let's see the most interesting variants. The XP-37, YP-37 and XP-40 were the early prototypes. P-40 was the first production model. These were not considered combat ready. 524 were ordered by the Air Corps, 200 were delivered, the remaining ones were upgraded to P-40B and P-40C standards. These only featured 250 caliber and 230 caliber machine guns. The P-40B model received armor around the cockpit, though the plane's protection around vital parts were still lacking. It also received 2 additional 30 caliber machine guns in the wings, raising the total number of guns to 6, 250 caliber and 430 caliber machine guns. The C variant received better radio equipment, self-sealing fuel tanks, and an option to carry a drop tank. Curtiss actually started working on an improved version of the P-40 the XP-46. This plane would have used a stronger engine, new wings and a nose section, and much heavier armament. The plan was a total of 10 50 caliber machine guns. Due to delays of this project, the Air Corps asked Curtiss to try to improve the P-40 instead. So they modified the P-40 to accommodate the Ellison V1710-39 engine, which was planned for the XP-46, and changed the armament to 4 50 caliber machine guns in the wings and deleted the nose guns to fit the bigger engine. Here we have an interesting story. The British actually wanted to order the XP-46, but because the Curtiss plant couldn't take any more orders, they went to North America for the P-51. Sir Harry Self, head of the British Purchasing Commission, was somewhat concerned that North America never designed a fighter before, and insisted they should obtain the data on the Curtiss XP-46. If we look at these pictures, we can see the similarities between the XP-46 and the P-51 prototype. It seems like the XP-46 had influence on the air intake and radiator placement, but North American was already well into the design phase when they acquired the XP-46 data. If you'd like to hear more details on the British part in the P-51 development, take a look at my P-51 history video where I talked about this topic already. As usual, you can find the link in the description or at the end of this video. Now after this little detour, back to the P-40 variants. Since the upgraded P-40 with the new engine performed actually better than the XP-46, the project was cancelled and the upgraded P-40 received the P-40D Kittyhawk name. The earlier mentioned P-40E variant received 2 additional 50 caliber machine guns and some minor changes. The P-40J variant was an experimental plan to fix the lacking high altitude performance. It was cancelled on the drawing board as the planned turbo-supercharged engine couldn't fit in the P-40 airframe. The P-40F was a successful attempt to fix the high-altitude performance by fitting a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine in the P-40. Though the project was a success and the performance was much better, the Merlin engines were in limited supply because so many planes used them. The P-40K was planned as the last version of the P-40 as it was meant to be replaced with a new development, the XP-60. But this new project was a complete mess. Originally planned to use a Continental engine as XP-53. The Air Corps asked it to be completed with a Merlin engine instead and renamed it XP-60. Then, because of the delay with the Merlin engines, it was modified to use Ellison engines as XP-60A. Then it was tested with the Wright R2800 engine until finally the whole project was cancelled, so the P-40 stayed in production. And they were needed, as before the first K models rolled out the assembly line, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The P-40L model was a lighter version of the Merlin-powered P-40F. For weight saving, several armor plates were removed and their ammo capacity was reduced. In 1944, Curtiss tried to modernize the P-40 to keep its performance on level with the newer fighters. This was the P-40Q model. This variant received a new 1400 horsepower engine, longer nose, and later a bubble canopy. Despite the development, it was found that the new variant was still inferior to the P-51 and P-47 fighters, so it was abandoned. During World War II, 18 RAF squadrons used P-40 fighters. The first units were fitted with these planes in early 1941. The P-40's lack of high-altitude performance, thanks to its single-stage supercharger, quickly showed on the Western European front. They were only used in fighter role by the British for 29 sorties before relegated to low-altitude reconnaissance. But in North Africa, they could take on the German and Italian fighters, as usually the air battles were fought at lower altitudes. From 1942, the Desert Air Force received the upgraded P-40D Kittyhawks and later the Merlin-powered P-40F models too. Below 15,000 feet, the P-40 proved to be a match to the German Bf-109s, especially the earlier models, but could take on the later F models as well. The German fighters had the advantage at higher altitudes, but as we mentioned, in North Africa the air battles were usually fought at low and medium altitudes, which helped the P-40's chances. From late 1942, they were mainly used as fighter bombers, as the Spitfires took over the fighter role in North Africa. The Flying Tigers, an American volunteer group, fought as part of the Chinese Air Force against the Japanese from late 1941, flying P-40B and C variants. Though they could not match the maneuverability of the Japanese fighters at low speeds, but at higher speeds they could hold their own. In 1941 and 42, the P-40 was the main US Army Air Force fighter in the Pacific. Together with the P-39s and the F-4F Navy fighters, they had to take on the Japanese forces until the later, more advanced US fighters like the F-6F, the P-38 and P-51 arrived. The P-40s suffered high losses in the first months of the war, but after better training to utilize the plane's strengths and developing new tactics, they could take on the Japanese fighters, especially at higher speeds. They served until the end of the war, but their short range slowly left them out of the fight, as the longer range newer fighters took over. The P-40s were used in the Mediterranean and the Middle East by the US Army Air Force from July 1942. They were used extensively and racked up a good kill ratio, and were in use up until 1944. The famous African-American unit, the 99th Fighter Squadron, the so-called Red Tails, flew P-40 fighters up until 1944, when they received P-51 fighters. The Soviet Union received P-40 fighters through Lend-Lease from 1941. Altogether they received around 2,500 P-40 fighters between 1941 and 1944, and they flew combat missions from November 1941 against the German forces. Much like with the P-39 fighters, the P-40's lack of performance at high altitude was not that much of a problem on the Eastern Front, where the air battles were fought at low and medium altitudes. The Soviet pilots could take on the German fighters usually without problems, as the P-40 could match the performance of the German planes below 15,000 feet. Though they did well, the P-40s had their problems. They were not very well suited to the harsh winters, and many Soviet pilots usually preferred the heavier armament on the P-39 fighters. Many other nations used P-40s during and after the war. Brazil, Egypt, Finland and Turkey, for example. The P-40 fighters played a critical role in the early years of the war, in the Pacific, in North Africa and in the Middle East. Similarly to the P-39 fighters, the P-40's poor high-altitude performance prevented them to be used successfully in Western Europe. But at the other theaters of the war, they carried the fight until the newer, stronger fighters arrived. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.